You're listening to Data Stories Leaders at Work, a podcast for professionals in the advertising and marketing insights. Advance your own career by listening to personal anecdotes from some of the brightest entrepreneurial and creative minds in the industry. This is your host, Rahul Jerome.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Data Stories Leaders at Work podcast. On this edition, I have founder of Relevant Insights, Michela Mora. Prior to running her own business, she managed the research team at Blockbuster Online and Match.com. Michela is fluent in English, Spanish, and Swedish, bringing a unique perspective to the market research industry through a multicultural lens. With an education background in psychology, advertising, PR, and marketing research, she's a mixed method qual-quant researcher with over 20 years of experience working at the intersection of market research, insights, customer experience, and user experience to support business decisions from both the client side and the supply side in the US and abroad across different industry verticals. So let's hear from Michela herself about a fascinating journey. Data Stories, Leaders at Work, episode 26. Hello, Michela. Thank you very much for the opportunity and coming on the show, Data Stories, Leaders at Work. It's good to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'm wondering, where do I start off the interview, Michela? Because you've got such a fascinating career. You've lived in countries probably more than the countries I've visited in my lifetime so far. And some of your early education sounds really interesting as well. So I'm a bit stuck where to start it, but let's go to your early education. From my research, I found out that you've done some courses and degrees in market research, which is quite fascinating for me because a lot of people I've interviewed come from different backgrounds, which somehow accidentally have them landed in the world of research and insights. But you've chosen to specifically do some degrees that specialize in market research, which is really interesting. Let's go to your university degree at Cuban University. And why did you choose to study in research and insights? Why did you choose that degree?
Well, I know there's a lot of people coming to the insights industry from different paths, and my path has been, I have relied heavily on education, as you mentioned. I grew up in Cuba and first got a master's degree in psychology from Havana University, and early on I got interested in social psychology and the influence of mass media. So my first job as a researcher was doing media research for the Cuban Institute of Radio and Television, which is the equivalent of Nielsen in the US. And I did a lot of audience research with teenagers and children's programming. In Cuba at that time, there was only 2 channels. It's like 2 NPR channels. There was no advertising. It was like public television. And then I left and went to Sweden, lived there, and got my second degree in public relations, PR, and advertising at Stockholm University. And that's where I really discovered market research, because Cuba has a closed economy, so there is no free market. So the concept of market research is foreign. And that's where I discovered marketing and marketing research. And since I already had a research background, this was the closest. So I started doing publicity analysis and then went to work for the largest research agency in Sweden, which is now, I think, the last iteration. They became part of TNS. And when I came to the US, then I got my third master's degree in marketing research at the University of Texas in Arlington, which is an excellent program. My path every time I go to a country has been to go through the higher education path. It's a long one, but I felt that it gave me the best foundation to work in the field. So I started working in the marketing science group at Mark Research. It's an agency here in the Dallas area in Texas. It has a long history in the industry. And then went to the client side to work as a sales forecast analyst for Proline International, a hair care CPG company. They were bought by Alberto Culver, so they don't exist anymore. But I did more of analytical work there. And went to Match.com and research and Blockbuster Online, first as a research manager and then research director. And when I went to Match.com is when I started blending market research and UX research, which before it was called UX. Right now is the thing, right? But it has existed for a long time.
Yes.
And because in both companies, there was a big focus on digital products. UX is just an area of research, product development research, essentially, but more with applications on the digital realm, I guess. And so I realized early that I needed to know more about principles of graphic and interaction design to be able to communicate with the product team and to provide support to designers and developers and product managers. So I ended up getting a UX master certification from the Nielsen-Norman Group in user research and interaction design. They are the ones who really started the field of user experience. And so my path has always been through education, as you can see.
All right.
I feel like I've been in school for a long time.
There seems to be a new name for a research methodology or a technique popping out every now and then. We've got from UX research to UI, from CX to EX, from audience to digital to clusters. Did these exist during your early part of your career, or is this more of a recent trend?
Well, I know there's now a lot of debates about how to call things because we are in the era of entrepreneurship and the creation economy. Everybody's trying to come up with new names for old stuff. We didn't have necessarily, it was just research. It was different methods. And if you have gone through, that's why the more classical and formal education research prepares you to understand all the different methodological approaches. If you understand that, the different areas of in categories of research, so we talk about qualitative and quantitative, we talk about primary and secondary, that helps you to create a system around, create a menu of methods that you can then use to decide, to select from when a business problem comes to mind. So if you will see me talking on LinkedIn and in my post about first define the problem and then think about the method, not the other way around. People come sometimes and say, let's do user interviews, or let's do usability testing, and let's do surveys. It's like, stop for a second and first let's talk about the business problem, and then we decide which of those methods and approaches are the most appropriate. So what I have seen in UX, and I have been to, I got the training, and even at NNG, which is, they are very known in this area, I saw that research methods are just adaptations of what we have been doing in market research for a long time. They just change the name, they do some specific applications sometimes. And people now talking about UX research as something new, but it's not. It's just a discipline. Like you have advertising research and you have certain set of techniques that is used in, for example, shopper research, but they are all part of the same family. And they are just applications of it. Particularly in the qualitative research field, there's a lot that has been appropriated and adapted. And sometimes people come up with names that don't say much, but they sound cool. And what happens is that new people that come to the field and see those names, and they don't see the connection to the roots of the method. And so they are not able to find more information or learn more about. So that's why I'm always in educational mode, making the parallels between, the terms used so people can find their path to learning more about it.
Michaela, I must ask you this, knowing that you've had a stint at Blockbuster, and there's a famous, and you probably have had people ask you this. There's a famous story, obviously, Blockbuster sort of refused to invest in Netflix when it was still the idea was at an infancy stage. From your stint at that time, did you anticipate or predict that the future of films would be online streaming when you were at Blockbuster?
Well, I think at that time, I wasn't there when Netflix come and tried to sell the concept, which is true. They say no. And that's what happens when you're in a monopoly position. You think, but I came there, a big group came from Match.com when they realized that there was a potential in the market. And this was when Netflix was only 5 million subscribers and the stock was $18. And they realized there was potential for this. And so they built the digital team. And that was actually the best job I ever had, because our management team was really very much into research. Everything was based on research. And I gave birth essentially to a big product there. It was called Blockbuster Total Access. Once we started with a market segmentation study where we saw that there was this potential of merging the store experience with the online experience. At that time, there was just renting DVDs online was a very niche group of people who were doing that. And that was Netflix. They created the category. And we had the stores, but the people started having both experiences if they wanted that. And so we did tons, like 2 years worth of research with market segmentation, concept testing, focus group, pricing, did a lot of conjoint studies, a lot of usability testing. So the product development was on the digital side. That's why we did a lot of UX before it was called UX. We have a usability testing lab in-house. And all the things was happening at the same time. So all the UX research was coordinated with all the marketing research, because we needed to figure out, is there feasibility in the market? How you're going to position the product, what is the pricing that you're going to put at the same time, what is the experience that people are having. And so when we launched, we grew 1.5 million subscribers in 9 months. And we were the only thing growing in our company, really. But then there was a change in administration. The new guy that came didn't understand digital. And the first thing he did was to close the division.
Oh, wow. That's
and
mind-boggling, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. So can you think now, how many millions Netflix has? Don't you think it was like a space for another competitor, right?
Absolutely.
And 2 years later, he killed the company, essentially, because he was a retailer. He wanted to revive the stores. That's what he knew. And he totally didn't see the digital, in the horizon. And at that time, streaming was not necessarily in anybody's view yet, but I guess it was coming because, even during that, Redbox came too, and we had our boxes too. So Blockbuster was a little bit reactive. They were not necessarily paying attention to what the small guys were doing, although we were in the online business, but we were a small group. And the giant was the stores, right? And so when they killed us, they killed the business, really, essentially.
Yeah. What would your advice be for any sort of business, whether it's a small business or a large brand, who maybe some might have a monopoly over their market share? What's your advice, going from your experience and what you had from working at Blockbuster?
Keep a brand health and customer satisfaction tracker alive.
Right.
Those are costly. Those take time and money and resources, but they are your best tool to monitor what is happening. Because you're going to see newcomers, but there is some categories that not much is happening, but there's a lot of movement. So you need to keep tracking that. If you do ad hoc research now and then, you will miss it. But if you keep a tracking program where you are taking the pulse of what's happening with your competitors, you have to track your competitors, you have to track your brand, how it's perceived, how it's used. You're not only necessarily competing with your competitors in the category, you might be competing with other substitute products. Like, for example, entertainment. When we were at Blockbuster, we were really competing with people's time, how they use it in entertainment. And so even if we track Netflix and also other video rental competitors, we're also looking at how people were using the internet and what are the things they were doing in the free time, instead of watching movies. So you have to be broad in your view of who your competitors are, go beyond your category and track all the time. That's the thing. And I know trackers have lost their luster. Before COVID, there was like, we don't need that. We just do social listening with social media, which has its own issues. And now I think some companies realize, we need to start tracking again because things are changing. Now they don't know what's happening with COVID, how people are changing their behavior and habits. And so they need to track again. But the big brands, the ones that really understand that you need to get feedback, constant feedback from the market, keep those programs.
Data Stories Leaders at Work podcast is brought to you by Audience. Audience is the world's pioneering audience intelligence platform, helping marketers and consumer researchers to be innovative and develop relevant audience-centric strategies through proprietary social consumer segmentation and providing insights on who they are and how to engage with them in the most meaningful way. For more information, please go to www.audience.com. Audience spelled as in AUDIENSE, audience.com.
How's your journey shaped who are you today? Are there any major moments in your life that change your trajectory? You've worked both client side as well as agency side, and you've gone on to set up your own business, and you've been running your own business, your own insight agency for quite a few years now. Tell us about your journey, how it has shaped who you are today.
Oh boy, it's been a long journey. I actually started the business just right after Blockbuster, when we all lost our jobs, or the whole division were let go the same day. And we were looking for jobs here in the area. And I already work on the agency side. And one of the things that I didn't like about that was that it's very silo. And I used to work in the marketing science team at Mark Research, and of course they had the account management. I don't know how they organize now, but at that time they had the account management group, and there was a lot of back and forth. You don't always have the chance to talk to clients to understand the problems, and sometimes a lot of things get lost in translation. And finding that holistic position was hard, where you get involved in all pieces of the project. And so when we all lost the job, people start landing in different places. They have already worked with me, and they start calling me, can you do this project? Can you do that project? And it's like, well, maybe I can do this. I was not really looking for, starting my own business, but it came that way because a lot of people were asking me to work with them. And it has been doing that for 14 years now.
And it's a happy accident again there for you, isn't it? So
yeah,
people have reached out to you and you didn't intend to do your own thing.
Yeah, and it helps to have breadth and depth in research methodologies to be able to do many different types of research, which is what I like. I like the variety. I miss from working on the client side, I miss the fact that you're closer to the business issues when you're on the client side. As a consultant, you are a little more removed, depending on how open the clients are to share the actual problems with you. And sometimes you get that chance. Sometimes they're a little more secretive about it. And so there is a limitation to how much you can recommend and do if the client doesn't let you to do that. But on the agency side, in my case, I'm involved in all phases of the project, and that gives me the best chance at helping clients to find the right research design and also be able to translate that into the business implications, finding the answers to the business problems that came to me to solve. So that's the beauty of it. It's a lot of work, but it is also very rewarding that way.
Knowing what you know now after all these years and doing what you're doing, what's the one thing you wish you'd have known before you began your career?
When I started my career, I had a very naive vision of what a researcher, the value of research for businesses. I thought that people will just, it's so obvious, right?
Yes.
It's like, you need that. Is like just knowing about methodology will kind of, sell the thing, right? I didn't know I was going to live in 2 different countries, start from scratch every time, learning 2 new languages, and to put so much effort and work in the process to really have a career, right? And coming from a different part of the world, the business piece was also unknown to me. And that's why I was so naive about it. And then I came to realize that people are susceptible to the same mistakes and biases when making decisions in business roles and as consumers. There are a lot of fragile egos and hubris and plain incompetence in many C-suites that refuse to use evidence-based insights to make decisions related to the strategy, the organization, the operations, and their own leadership. So the hard part of our profession that I didn't know is to be witness to many avoidable business mistakes when research is ignored or not done because it's seen as a cost and a barrier. So it has been discouraging at times, and I didn't know that.
Right.
but you learn over time to find ways to help clients to see the need of research.
What skills do you think, Michela, are essential for someone to be a good market researcher or an insight practitioner?
I cannot, stress enough the need to really learn the basics of research, the foundation of methodology. This is people trying to wing it many times, and that's how you get a lot of bad research out there. So you really have to have a solid understanding of different methodologies to avoid being jailed by the law of the hammer. The Maslow discussed that in the 60s. If you have a hammer, everything is going to look like a nail. And if you really don't have a good foundation in research, you will end up just doing one type of research, even when it is not appropriate. So if you only do surveys, you will try to do surveys for everything. If you do interviews, user interviews, you will do that for everything. And that's not necessarily the best approach sometimes. So having that good foundation, it's a must, I think. And the other one is just critical thinking and adopting the scientific method as a lifestyle. You just look at things as hypotheses so you can guard against biases, which are, we're all susceptible to biases. You have to stop yourself and think, is this really something I really have evidence for, or do we need to test this? And so you have to be curious and open and question yourself, be willing to change your mind, to rethink. And then the third one would be to be diverse and flexible. in your thinking, and be a little eclectic, looking for different ways of approaching the same problem, the business problem. The business perspective is very important, particularly in our field. So it's something you always have to have in mind.
There's a question I want to rephrase. It came from a conversation earlier, and you also mentioned that one of the ways that you've set up your own business was people coming to you, and clearly they know the value working with you, what they get, and what should clients, when they want to engage a freelance researcher or a freelance practitioner or as a consultant, what things should they consider before they approach someone or they have someone in mind that they'd like to bring on board? Because as you said, everybody are doing the same thing, everybody is saying the same things, but how will an agency or client know if they want to engage a consultant that he or she is really good?
Well, I think it has to do with the client's perspective of what the role of the research supplier should be, and what is it they really need from the supplier of the consultant. Right now, the industry is evolving. There is a lot of focus on technology and tools. There's a lot of discussions about artificial intelligence and automation. And there is a lot of data collected with those tools, but there is little insight being derived from the data. People don't have time to really think about what to do with it and translate that into business implications. And so even when they have researchers in-house, which is now there is a big trend with do-yourself, it often is just a do-yourself data collection brought in-house. So researchers are overwhelmed and overworked, spending a lot of time doing data collection in-house because it's cheaper, it's faster. They have different survey tools. They have access to sample sources. They can do that. They can cook pretty quickly a meal with a few questions, and this is what we are seeing. But many times those teams are also working in silos. They are not collaborating and not necessarily always connecting the dots with the strategy of the company. And so when a client goes outside, sometimes if they are in a mindset of finding a strategic partner, they can help them to think through and plan and create, connecting all the dots across, for example, the customer journey from pre-sale to product use, and help them to understand how they can use, first, how to derive insights and how they can, what does that mean for the business? That's where, for example, we see companies not willing to invest in the traditional market research suppliers, but they're willing to pay a lot of money to management consulting companies like the McKinseys, the Accentures, and Bains of the world, right? Because what they're looking is for help in translating those insights into business implications. So, but to be able to do that, when someone says, I can help you to do that, they better know what the methodologies are behind the insights collected, because you can have a lot of bad data, and the ones that you have might not lend themselves to derive the good insights. So you have to have a combination of business acumen and also having a good foundation in research methodology. That's where the quality comes, which is now, it seems like it's not needed. If you think of the focus there is on technology, people assume, particularly the new people, they don't have a research foundation. They think that the tools are going to write the surveys for them. And the tools sell now like this little package products, which is just a set of questions, and people assume that those are being validated and that's the way to do it. And they even sometimes just adopt them without any type of customization. And that's how, for example, the surveys get a lot of bad rap, because there's a lot of bad surveys out there. It's just people don't know how to write it, ask the right questions. So quality is a key differentiator, and it tends to be combined with the process you work, how you work. In my case, I have a very collaborative style. I'm very big about caveats. And sometimes some clients don't like to hear about that. They already have some things in mind. That's how they want to do it. And I always try to be very transparent and say, you're going to get this with that. And these are the limitations. This is what we can do. No method is perfect. You always, ideally, going to get the best results if you combine different methods, and because they give you a different perspective. But you have to know, you have to have that background, you have to have that knowledge and methodology to be able to select the best approach.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. And I keep hearing that over and over again, that different methodologies provide different perspectives. You have to connect the dots and bring them together to give you a holistic view. Fantastic. Wonderful. Michela, I think we're coming up to our time. So let me ask you a quick couple of things before we wrap things up. Read a lot or listen to podcasts. Are there anything recently that you've read or listened to that has inspired you?
Oh, God. I am a book hoarder. Thanks God for digital books, because these days I don't have enough space at home to get all the books that I want to read. I continuously go back to and check a lot of market research classics, like the Market Research Applied Orientation from Malhotra and Consumer Behavior from Hawkins, Best, and Connie, and other classics I go back to often is Building a Strong Brands by Aker, and Design and Marketing of New Products by Herben and Hauser. That's one that I recommend to a lot of user UX people, because the books about product development was written in the 60s. In Sampling Techniques by Cochrane, and Pricing by Monroe, and a lot of multivariate analysis by Hare. I do also qualitative research, so we go back to Applied Qualitative Research by Margaret Roller, Complete Guide to Writing Questionnaires by Harris, During Naturalistic Inquiry by Erlandson. Most recent books I have enjoyed are The Jobs to be Done by Jim Kalbach and Quantifying the User Experience by Jeff Sauro. I'm also involved in multicultural research, and I recently read a wonderful book called What is Your Race by Kenneth Pruitt, a professor of social affairs at Columbia. And he does a great job at showing the evolution of what he calls statistical races in the census in the context of social, economic, and cultural changes in the U.S. It's a fascinating book. So I read a lot.
Yes, I can tell. Yeah, no, certainly. I think that there's some great collection there. We'll put links to some of those on the show notes as well. So if people want to access those resources, that would be helpful for them. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Michela. Are there any people that you'd like to call out today who have been influential throughout your career or your personal life? It could be your colleagues or your peers, or someone, a famous figure that you tend to follow?
Well, I would say the first one would be, it's more on my life, would be my father. He's still living in Cuba. He's the most perseverant person I have ever met in my life. His willingness to work hard in search for excellence is something I got from him without doubt. The second would be my first boss, the Cuban Institute on Radio and Television. He taught me how to write research reports. He had a way of showing the errors you made without making you feel bad about that. Really embody constructive criticism. So you felt grateful and enlightened and motivated to do better. So I could feel he believed in me, and it has been more than 30 years, and I still miss him. I always come back to those because I see them in my life every day almost.
So Michela, finally, let's wrap this up by asking you what's your personal vision? Where do you see yourself in the next 3-5 years? What's your vision for your business and yourself?
The vision is evolving as the industry evolves. As I said, technology has facilitated rapid data collection on both corporate researchers and suppliers. So there is more data than ever. And my goal is to continue providing high quality evidence-based insights that gives we work with a competitive edge. And we do that with a combination of breadth and depth of expertise in research methodologies, both qual and quant, that allow us to find the best research design that will provide answers to the business problems at hand. And we can help to connect the dots and derive insights and drive business outcomes. So my hope is that as the industry evolves, they come back to really what's important, which is using research to make decisions and stop the focus on technology in data collection. And you still need to invest in human capital to make this work. Technology alone, tools alone are not going to do it. Even despite all the promises of artificial intelligence, there's a limit to that. And there is also a lot of things to consider in terms of biases of those tools. And there's a lot of discussion now about bias against diversity from those tools, because those tools and those algorithms are made by people. And that's the point that some people, forget. So we still need human capital, and that's where I am.
Michela, all the best, and some of the highlights from your career are truly inspiring. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening. Leave us a rating and a review. Subscribe now to Data Stories Leaders at Work, available on all leading podcast platforms.